You will be the 15th.
Welcome to today's presentation of Sage ERP X3. And this is going to be an overview of the Sage ERP X3 technology. Hopefully everyone on the line today has seen a general overview of Sage ERP X3, and so you're probably already familiar with the circle of the functionality that Sage ERP offers as a complete ERP system. So we cover sales, purchasing, finance, manufacturing, and you can see those around the graphic here. What we're here today to discuss are these inner three rings of information. We're going to talk about the SAFE X3 platform, which is a Sage application for the enterprise, and I'm going to go through some administration, how to do reporting in and out of X3, how to move information in and out with importing and exporting, how to move information with web services. I'll cover an example for hardware requirements of X3, and then we'll do a demonstration of how you can X3 using the built-in development toolkit. X3, just so you know, is a platform that's based on the SAFE 4GL platform, and we support multiple companies, multiple sites, multiple legislations. We have a built-in search engine, workflow, visual processes, and document management. And all of this is contained within the same platform. So let's begin with administration. All of the users and the functionality is built within X3, so X3 will handle the user setup for you and the access that they have. We also integrate with Active Directory. So if you want to have X3 verify your username and passwords with Active Directory or another LDAP application, that's completely possible. Users are supported by functional profiles, which allow you to determine what the user is allowed or permitted to do in the system. For example, are they allowed to create a sales order? Can they edit a sales order, or can they close a sales order? The roles allow you to filter the data that user has access to, and then access codes further quantify what the user is allowed to do. So maybe down to the field level, you may specify what they can and cannot see within the system. You can also use it to specify what reports or how their screens or their functions look when they log into the system. So when you set up a user, you're going to define a code, a user login, their functional profile, and then some other properties. Now, I have a task here to help us move through our demonstration today. And you'll also notice that I'm running X3 within Internet Explorer. So we are 100% web native. You can choose to use Internet Explorer or the desktop client. And I have a task here from our customer service module that just makes a request that customer service needs to be restricted on the information they have access to from the sales order entry screen. So we're going to use access codes today to restrict that information. Let's take a look at my customer service user. Now, I happen to know that my sales order function is already set up with a restricted view called fast order entry. So I just need to see if my customer service user has the appropriate access codes. The sales manager is another example, and they have an access code here called sales administrator. This means that they'll have the ability to see their choice of sales order entry functions. If we take a look at the customer service user, you'll see that I do not have that access code. So now let's log in as a customer service user. And this time I'm going to log in using the desktop client so you can see the differences. My customer service user is set up with a process map using X3's visual processes that helps them learn how they need to process transactions through the system. I'm going to go ahead and click right to sales orders. And you can see that it takes me directly to sales order entry. I'm going to the function sales, orders, and orders. And the controls tab and the delivery tab pretty much have no information. Invoicing has a little bit, but I can't make any changes. And then we have the important lines tab where I would be able to enter new line items or modify order quantities and prices. If we log in using our sales manager login, I'll log in using the web client this time. Now, the sales manager typically doesn't go into our sales orders, so order entry isn't on his process map, but it is in his favorites menu. So we'll click on the favorites menu and open up sales orders. This time, because I have the sales administrator access code, I get prompted for which way I want to see the sales order transaction. You can see the fast order is still an option, so that was the way that we're looking at it from the customer service view. Or we can take a look at the standard order, which is going to show me all of the information available on a sales order. You can see I'm still at the same function, sales, orders, orders. This time the controls tab is full of information, same with the delivery and invoicing tabs, and I still have the same lines information. So access codes are one way to quickly restrict or change the way users see transactions and show or hide different fields. So I can say whether a user can edit a field or maybe they can only see that field, if at all. Now I believe I had another task here, so I'm just going to leave those two users logged in. And we'll take a look at my other user setup task. This one says that we are assigning a sales manager to a specific set of customers. Sales managers should only be able to see information for their 2 customers, and I have the 2 customer numbers here. So let's take a look at the sales manager setup. I can select the sales manager from my left list and go straight to the Roles tab. Roles are going to let me filter the information that that sales manager has access to. So I can assign 2 specific customer numbers as roles to this sales manager, and they will only be able to see information for those 2 customers. This is a practical example for things like having your customers have access to your ERP system but only see their data, or allow your suppliers to come in and check the status of their payments, only seeing their data. You can also use any information that you have. So if you really want to restrict sales managers, specific customer numbers probably isn't what you're going to do. You may do it by region or state codes or zip codes. You can certainly use any field within X3 to specify those roles. So let's take a look at the sales manager's login. And this time we're just going to go take a look at customers. So he has a process map for managing customers. And you can see that I only have 2 customers here. And if we go over to my customer service rep who is logged in with the desktop client, we can see under the customer management that there are actually a large number of other customers available in the system. They just aren't visible to our sales manager. So it looks like I've completed those 2 tasks. Again, the users are completely maintained within Sage ERP X3, so you don't have to worry about setting up database users or managing them from another system. Now that you know how to set up your users, you probably are going to be wondering how you can do reporting with Sage ERP X3. X3 allows you to build inquiries, export that information to Excel. It can be placed on a menu function, or it can be placed on a process diagram. I'm going to go through each of the types of reports within X3. But just to put in some context here, a portal view is like my IT task list that I have over here. So this is a portal view of available tasks. Somebody like a sales user might have a dashboard that looks like this. It contains a visual process map here, along with some charts and graphs of information and some other reports of information. And these are all created using the different types of reports within X3. The first one is our standard inquiries. Standard inquiries look like what you see now, which is a list of orders. And this list of orders can be filtered by criteria based on the company or based on the specific sales site or even a customer. You can filter some date information, and you have some other things where you can say, show me only open orders or signed orders, and a list of information. Now throughout X3, any grid that you can see, you can right-click on and choose to export that information to Excel, which will create an Excel workbook of this. You also have the ability to add some additional filtering criteria to standard inquiries, and then you can use the memo button to save that criteria so that you don't have to enter it over and over again. You also have the ability to see information in a paginated format. So I'm only loading 20 records at a time, And that's completely personalizable to how many records get loaded. A standard inquiry can be placed on a process diagram, as I've done today. I've added a process diagram that displays the list of orders. They can also be created as a portal view, so this is actually part of an inquiry, which can be placed on a thumbnail or placed on a screen itself, and then of course exported to Excel. I can personalize these inquiries using a tool from the development toolkit, which will let me move columns around. So all I have to do if I want to move the bill to customer to the beginning of the list is change this order column number to be less than 5, and it'll put it above the order number for me. I can save it. It makes it very easy for business users to personalize what their inquiries look like. Sage ERP X3 Standard Edition comes with more than 360 of these inquiries already built and ready to use. The next type of reporting within X3 is a standard report. A standard report can be accessed from the File Print menu or from the Reports menu. They can also be placed in those thumbnails or on a process diagram. And you enter a report code, specify some parameters, and then specify your printer or your destination. These can be printed to a document management system, they can be printed to PDF or Excel, or sent directly to an email address. Those reports can be customized as well using Crystal Reports. And when you set up a custom report, there's some basic information that you're going to need to provide. And for those of you who are familiar with Crystal Reports, you're aware that it's also a 3-pass system, which is fantastic for paginating a document and making sure your headers and your footers and all of your group totals work. But it sometimes means those reports that crunch a lot of numbers are going to take a while to run because Crystal runs through all data 3 times. Well, Sage ERP X3 is aware of that deficiency in Crystal, and so we've provided what we call standard processing or pre-processes for the Crystal reports. So there's some opportunity to build some temporary tables and allow the ERP system to do the heavy loading of the number crunching and then pass that information directly to Crystal. To customize or personalize these reports, you have the ability to add your own specific processing that can add additional tables or additional queries to those reports and further allow you to do other actions within the system when you print a report. These processes are also used to flag things like once you've printed a check or once you've printed a picking ticket to know that it's actually been printed or not. And you also get to specify things like the destination. So maybe if this is an AP check printing from a Crystal report, you want to specify that it can only be printed from the printer sitting in the accounting office. You can then say mandatory, and that will be the only printer this report will be allowed to be used. You can also print additional documents with this report, specify whether or not a user can print it from a reports menu, and then specify whether or not this can only be printed from the job scheduler. So maybe it is a big report, and you don't want users to be able to run it at 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is working. So you can set up some hourly constraints as to when they're allowed to run it. You also have access codes and authorizations associated with the report, so you can specify who's allowed to run it and what those permissions are. The parameters tab are just like Crystal's standard parameters, where I can pass information from X3 to the Crystal report to further simplify the data set that's going across. User-defined inquiries are another way to build information or build these thumbnails to display within Sage ERP X3. There's 3 different types of user-defined inquiries. The first one is our Graphical Requester, which is generally used by any business user. Our next one is created by super users who learn and understand table names and field names. And then our third one's for the IT administrators who like writing select statements. I have a task over here for reporting. So let's take a look at what we need to do. Purchasing and AP need the ability to see the purchase orders that are still open and have not been invoiced. The report needs to include key information along with the total dollar value on the purchase order. So let's use a Graphical Requester to handle this request. I'm going to click on Graphical Requester, and I already have a list of the orders which are not invoiced. And let me just enlarge this so it takes up my whole screen. And what I have here is a table for the purchase order headers, and it's linked to my suppliers. And users can add more tables by clicking the Add Table button. Double-click to add a table. And then to add new fields, they can just double-click on them. So let's take a look at my fields at the bottom here. And it looks like I need a total dollar value on the purchase order. So I can scroll through the list, and I have the ability to sort the list. You'll also see that currently these are actually descriptions instead of your normal code, which means a basic user can find what they're looking for. And there's my invoice lines total. And I just double-click again to add it to the list. Now I wanted to group this report by supplier, so it's already grouped by supplier, and I want to summarize my total on the PO. So I can just click the Add or the Sum button. I can add more groups to this, so if I want to add the company name to the group, whoops, I just want to click and drag it next to the supplier. So you can see how easy it is to arrange or summarize information using the Graphical Requester. And if you add more tables that already have key relationships between them, X3 will go ahead and take care of creating that link for you. So I can save my changes and validate my report, and then we can run it from here while we're looking at it. There we go. And so now we can see my list. It's every single purchase order is listed here. But I have these level or these summarize buttons. So if I level up one, now it's listed total by supplier. And if I level up again, I can see my outstanding purchase orders totaled by site. So again, I can right click, I can export this directly to Excel, or I can drill back down to see the details of that information. Makes it very easy for your average business user to learn how to build their own information. And then those graphical requesters can be placed on a menu function. So I have access to them from the compass, and I can go to my list of reports. I can add them to my favorites menu, so I can print them from there, preview from there, or I can create my own little gadget or thumbnail to show that information right on my screen. The standard requester, as I said, is for your super user who learns table codes and field codes. Standard requesters allow you to do a little bit more complicated display of information. So you have the ability, rather than just displaying an exact field in a table, you can actually create a formula. The last one is your SQL Requester. These are usually created by an IT administrator, and they can create SQL views within X3 and then use those views or use a regular select statement to do complicated queries that can't be done with a graphical requester. An example with that is a product without an order. The reason that it can't be done with a graphical requester is you actually need what's called a left outer join, and just linking tables together doesn't suffice. So you have to do that using the select statement and go ahead and create your codes. You still have the ability to list parameters for those fields as well. And with any of the requesters, you have the ability to define if maybe this is a chart instead of just data. Let me go back to the standard requester and show you that. The Advanced tab gives you some capability to define how many lines should load at a time, add some additional selection criteria or some additional table linking. And then the graphic side lets you define whether this is represented as a graph of information, so what type of graph is it, a line, a graph, area, or sectors, and then is this done as a table of information or a graph representation. And it's as easy to do as changing the list. So it makes it very nice and simple to create graphs of information, like the ones you can see here on my Sales tab. Okay, so then the next type of information you can pull out of Sage ERP X3 is done using what we call business statistics. Now let me show you an example of a business statistic. On my dashboard, I have a sales booking summary here, And this sales summary shows me total sales, shipments, and invoice today, week to date, month to date, and year to date. For those of you who are familiar with trying to report information in multiple time periods, you're aware this could be a very complicated query. Well, we've simplified queries like that using what we call our business statistics. Business statistics within Sage ERP X3 are like tallies that are constantly running with every transaction. So every time I post a sales invoice, it's going to update information like achieved year to date or achieved last year. So now I can run an inquiry like this one that shows me my sales invoices this year compared to last year and the variance between them. Now, I actually haven't processed any sales invoices in my demo yet, so it looks like I'm not doing very well this year. Business statistics get to be defined on the table or the action, what defines that transaction or what you want to gather. And Standard Edition comes with more than 50 of these that are used standard across businesses, already set up and configured for you. And then you have some capacity to go ahead and modify how they're going to behave. Is this something that you want done daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, maybe even every 10 years? What are the important fields that you want to track during this process? And then what type of information do you want to capture? What are you expecting to change? So this gives you things like your AR aging very quickly, sales information, statistical forecasting, can all be done and available to you in real time. You don't have to worry about waiting for a long report to run or multiple systems to synchronize. This information is constantly being captured throughout the ERP system. One more thing to mention about Sage ERP X3 reporting is we do have an optional integration with business objects. This would allow you to synchronize your information from X3 into a data warehouse. So again, any of the X3 reporting can be created as a menu function, added to a portal view, or placed on a process diagram like you're looking at now. Now that you know how to get information out of X3, let's talk about bringing information into X3. The most common way to do this is through our import or export templates. Our import templates allow you to bring information into the system, and it's important for me to mention that whether you use our import templates and a flat file or an Excel document, or if you key that information by hand, X3 is going to run the exact same business rules against both transactions. So we're going to take a look at a template here for sales orders, and I have an Excel file, which I'll show you in a second, that we'll use as a sample transaction. The sales order template is linked to the sales order object. I happen to know that because we do use some naming conventions, and you can become pretty familiar with all the object names and know everything that's related just following those conventions. But the link to the object is what tells X3, this is a sales order. Please run all of the same logic that you would if I were entering this by hand or manually. An activity code is going to let me modify any changes or flag any changes so that I know that I've made them. An access code, again, you'll see these throughout the system, allow me to specify who's actually allowed to run this import file. I still have a standard and specific process option, so maybe there's some additional code or lookups that need to be done or run during this import process. And then I can specify whether this template that I'm creating is going to be allowed to be used for importing and exporting. And then maybe I also want to kick off an email once this import template is completed. I can do that using the workflow. I can also specify whether or not this template is allowed to update existing transactions. So maybe if I provide a sales order number and that sales order number already exists within my system, am I allowed to make changes and just assume it's the same document, or do I block that transaction from occurring? This becomes important if you want to do things like EDI transactions. I get to define the structure of the file. So is it a character delimited file, ASCII, XML file, or just a fixed length file? If it's delimited, what is the field separator? And I'll use the comma for the moment. But you can use things like a pipe or a caret or a tilde. You have your record separator, your line separator, and then you define your field delimiter and your file format depending on what type of language you're using or what other system you're integrating with. And you get to define your date format as well that would be recognized. You also at the bottom define what tables you're actually going to be importing that information into. So I'm going to load information into our sales order header table and our sales order detail table. The Fields tab lets me define at the field level where that information is in the file. So this document, the first line is going to be the sales site, followed by the order type, sold to, customer number, and a customer reference number. And then each line within the order, so each product that they want to purchase, is going to have a product number and a quantity ordered. I'm going to let X3's business rules define all the other information like shipping addresses or payment terms or pricing information. So let's take a look at my sample sales order file. And Microsoft will just make sure I intend to open it there. This is my sample file, opened in Excel. It is a comma delimited file, so Excel knows how to separate the columns for me. The first line here is the header of my first sales order. Line number 6 is the second order, and line number 10 is the third order. And my first order has 4 part numbers here and then 4 quantities. Again, you'll notice there's no pricing information, payment terms, shipping preferences. X3 is going to handle all of that for me. So let's go ahead and process that sales order now. I'll go ahead and launch our import process file and tell it to go ahead. Again, X3 is going to run the same business logic, and I'm going to get the same messages that I would once this file completes if I had while I was entering this manually. So if we take a look at the lines here, this reference already exists for this customer was the first message that I got. Well, chances are I've imported the same file and used the same customer purchase order number, so that one's okay. Doesn't stop anything, it just gives you a warning. It does also let me know that the next 4 products that I have are not available in inventory. So I wasn't able to follow any of my allocation rules, but it went ahead and created the order. The second order was able to create, and I actually had available stock, so it allocated some inventory to those orders as well. Same with the third order. It went ahead and created it and was able to allocate the inventory. If we take a look at the sales order transaction within X3, we can start with the first order that was created here and take a look at the lines tab. Now remember those products that couldn't be allocated? The quantities have been highlighted in yellow. This was done as a personalized style to just let the sales order person know that there might be a problem here. Just a warning to highlight an issue using X3's customized styles. The other 2 orders that I have placed don't have anything highlighted on the order quantity, which means I can tell really quickly that everything should be fine with this order without me taking a further action. If I open up Outlook here, you would see that I also received an email confirmation to the customer just to let them know that their order has been placed using X3's workflows. Exporting works the same way, so I can use a template once and create an import file as well as an export file. So if I want to export a list of products, it's very easy to do, so I can upload them somewhere else or send them to a customer for a catalog. And then import and export jobs can be set up using our batch server. You can think of the batch server as a job scheduler. You can schedule it to pull a directory so that it'll check it every so often and see if there's any files that need imported. The batch server can also be used to run various functions within Sage ERP X3, like validating invoices automatically. And then you can also schedule your own jobs as you want and keep an eye on them or get a message or an email whenever something has not gone as planned. The next way, and the more real-time way to share information with Sage ERP X3 or with other integrated systems is through what we call web services. Web services follow the SOAP communication protocol, and they allow you to conduct real-time transactions with Sage ERP X3 and another system that's web service compliant. When I say real-time transactions, just to compare it to an import or an export, importing, you're dropping a file somewhere and waiting for another system to pick it up. In web services, it's like a telephone call. You make the call and you wait for the other person to answer, and you have a real-time communication. To deal with web services, all we need to do is actually publish an object. So I have my sales order tasks here published, and let's take a look at that. All you do is select your object, which is our task object, and when you click the publication button, which I've done beforehand, it will create the XML for you. So I have the XML generated that I would share with the other third party or the other system that I'm going to be integrating X3 using web services. This gives me a list of the fields, grouping of them, which happens to be the screen they are on X3, and the field lengths and characteristics. I also get the XSD view that's already been created for me. So it makes sharing information and integrating X3 very simple because you don't have to generate or create this XML or these standards all by yourself, which means I can integrate things like a web commerce or a shopping cart. I can integrate with a business partner who wants to do real-time transactions with me. I can also integrate with legacy systems or other systems I may have within my organization. Well, we're going to pretend that my customer service or my IT task list over here is actually integrated with a third-party help desk. So the ERP users can enter their tasks with X3, but the IT help desk people actually mark it completed, which is going to be this checkbox here, and report any notes using another system, and that information's brought back to Sage ERP X3 using web services. We're going to do an example of that now using our X3's test harness. So I set up the test harness, logged in here with my folder name, and now I just need to tell it what is the name of my web service. And I can click Web Service Description. Whoops. Helps when I call it the correct thing. Let me try the context again. I just have to give it an instance name and a login, so who's the web service logging as. And all this does is it replicates. I don't actually have a third-party system for you to show you how it integrates, but this is going to show you what that other system would be sending and receiving to X3. So the web service description just shows me the XML I showed you earlier. This would be what comes back. If I want to do a read, we can see what information looks like. Whoops. And we're just going to copy this task number here and paste it into my test harness. And then I'll send the read command through the web service. Now if I was the other system, this is the information or the results that I would get back. So I get the result back in the XML format we've already defined with the different fields. So here's the task number field, and you can see there's my task number again. Then you have my description further down in the description field. And we're going to update the completed field, which is actually this task done. And right now the value is a 1, but we need to switch it to a 2 so that when we look at this object here, this completed checkbar will be marked and we'll fill in some notes. So let me close that for the moment. And rather than watch you or let you watch me type, I've already prepared it ahead of time. These are the parameters that would need to be passed using web services, or the XML that would be passed, to mark that completed. So let's go back to my test harness, go down to my modification or passive parameters box, and then just click the modify action. So we're going to modify my transaction. You can see how quickly those results come back. Instance, it's real time, and it's updated that task done field and left me some notes. So I can show you what that looks like within Sage ERP X3. And my completed checkbox is there, as well as just some notes that the issue has been resolved. Again, web services are great for real-time transactions like a shopping cart, so if you want to place orders or check inventory or look up customer information. It can also be used for interactions with business partners, legacy systems, or any other system that supports web services. Next thing to talk about is some hardware requirements, and I have a simple configuration for 100 users. Within this configuration, we have some users who are going to access Sage ERP X3 from the internet, and they're actually going to come directly to X3 without going through a company VPN or a firewall. So I've placed what we call an X3 web server outside of the corporate firewall. Hopefully this is set up with SSL so that it is encrypted. And then the web server will take care of communicating with the Sage ERP X3 application server, which is the big machine sitting behind the firewall. Also behind the firewall is going to be the rest of the company or the rest of the users. And for 100 users, again, depending on transaction volumes, this is just an example, I have 2 connection or process servers. Let's talk about what these machines look like. I'm going to start with the X3 application server. The X3 application server is made up of 2 components. First, you have our database or database management system, and then you're going to have the safe X3 application server component. Both of these will reside on the same machine. We do support Windows or a Linux or AIX environment, so X3 is operating system and database agnostic. If you want to run it using Windows, we support Windows Server 2008 R2, running Microsoft SQL Server 2008 R2, and we do now support Microsoft SQL Server 2012 with the latest version of X3. If you are looking to run this in a Linux or an AIX environment, it's Linux Red Hat or AIX 7.1, and then for the database management system, you're going to be using Oracle 11G. I have some preliminary hardware specs. It's a 2 quad-core, 2.4 gigahertz or better, faster is always better, processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and then 3 RAID configurations. And these RAID configurations are based on best practices for the database management system. So if you're talking about Microsoft SQL Server, the first RAID is going to be used for your operating system and only your operating system. The second RAID, or RAID 5, is going to be used for the database files as well as the application server files. And then the third RAID, we're going to split the database MDF from the log file or from that transaction file to give you some better performance. And those are just database best practices. These specs are based on a physical machine, so you may need to tweak these or change them if you're talking about doing it in virtual environment. As the number of users grow within your system, Sage ERP X3 allows you to add what we call connection servers to handle the number of users. A connection server is made up of up to 3 X3 components on the same machine, or they may be separated depending on your installation or configuration. The first is your web server. The web server allows you to access the application using Internet Explorer. It may need to be separated from the rest of the components if you put it outside of your firewall, or maybe you want to have some warehouse transactions using our automated data collectors or barcode scanners, and you may want to dedicate a machine to those transactions. So that component can be separate or it can be on the same machine. You're going to have an X3 process server connection, which handles the transactions between the users and the application server, and you're going to have a report server, which will handle the printing for any users who aren't using the desktop client. You're going to multiply that times the number of users. The machine I have here handles about 15 to 25 users, again, depending on actual transactions. These are a Windows Server 2008 R2, and we do suggest they're virtualized because no ERP data is stored on them. So it's a simple machine, 2.4 gigahertz or better, 4 gigs of RAM, and a single RAID configuration. Again, no ERP data is actually here, it's just used for processing. And the number of connection servers that you need depends on the number of users. So if you're under 50 users, chances are all you need is 1 application server that's going to handle the database and the application for you. And then as you start to climb, this is 100 users, I've split off some of the users into 2 separate connection servers, and I added a third or a fourth machine here as a web server for external connectivity to X3. As businesses grow or as your system becomes more evolved or more in-depth or integrated with other systems, you can add additional connection servers and split out those components based on your business needs. There's some other considerations that I haven't mentioned but should certainly be considered when you're setting up your hardware requirements for Sage ERP X3. The first one is the bandwidth. We do have a web client, which is what you're looking at now. It requires about 40 kilobits per second of internet bandwidth to run sufficiently. The desktop client, which is the one I logged in with as the customer service user, that requires a little bit more bandwidth. And X3 does require a persistent connection between the user and the database server. So if at any point that connection drops, the user will be asked to reconnect and start over. If power and consistent internet connectivity is an issue, you may want to look at a Citrix or a terminal services solution. And you can see the bandwidth requirements there are much lower as well. So maybe you have a remote office that only has a really slow DSL connection. Those are also options. I have not mentioned anything about disaster recovery and redundancy. That's certainly up to you. I certainly recommend it. The solution I showed today is a single instance. So what pieces of that you want to replicate, you want to consider. You certainly need some backup processes. I did kind of mention an SSL certificate might be needed if you want to have access to X3 strictly through the internet without connecting to a corporate VPN first. Or maybe you want to allow your vendors or your customers to have direct access. You want to make sure that information is encrypted. You may want to set up a VPN to help further ensure that information is encrypted. And then you also want to take into consideration perhaps some load balancing for those who might be looking at an installation of a couple hundred users. And now we've gotten to the fun part of our presentation today. At least this is what I consider the fun part. I'm going to take the opportunity to show off our development toolkit and how easy it is to personalize Sage ERP X3. Again, you get the development toolkit with X3. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take our product master screen and I'm going to add a field. And for some reason, my company has decided that they want to hold each sales rep responsible for a couple products or the success of those products. So I just need to add the sales rep field to the product master screen. So I'm going to add it right here where I have some blank space. And the first thing I'm going to need to do is add that field to the table that's actually related to the product master. Well, unfortunately, I forget the name of that table. So I'm going to show you how to figure that out. Well, the first thing to do is press our F6 key. F6, once you're in any field within X3, is going to give you this message box. And this message box gives you quite a bit of information. For those developers, it's quite handy to do. And for users, you probably would only need to use this if you ever called support. They might ask you to clarify the name of a field. This is one way to do it. So if I take a look at the screen, I can see the name of the screen is ITM0. It also happens to tell me the name of the field I was in, as well as the data type and how many characters that field can hold. So let's start by looking at the screen ITM0. And we're going to go to the screen section here. And X3 remembers that I was on ITM0 not too long ago, so it brought it up first. And in case I forgot and just want to verify that I'm still on the same screen, I can click the Web Visualizations button. And that's going to go ahead and bring up a preview of the screen. Now you'll notice that this preview here is only a small section, which is what we call the header of the window we were looking at before. Within Sage ERP X3, we consider this entire screen that you see now is actually considered a window. And then within a window are multiple screens. So this header is a screen, and then each tab is also a screen itself. So the reason I came here is to figure out which table I need to add my field to in order to get the sales rep field on my screen. Well, screens are linked tightly with tables, and so at the bottom here I have a list of the tables that are related to the screen. Well, there's only one, so I can right-click on my table and go straight to my table dictionary. The table dictionary is where I'm going to manage everything about that table within Sage ERP X3. So I don't have to write select alter table statements. I don't have to worry about creating tables using the database management system. X3 is going to store all that metadata for me and handle it. So I have a table code here, which is just the name of my product master table. The Fields tab is going to list all the fields and information like the data type or the field names. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here and add my new table field. Now, X3 does have some development recommendations and best practices, and I'm about to break one right now. Anytime that you add a field or an object or a screen within Sage ERP X3, our best practices will tell you, make sure that you begin the name of that object with an X, a Y, or a Z. X's are reserved for things that are done by a Sage or by a Sage partner for regional legislative changes. So X's in codes means this is done for North America. X3 is a global product, so we have special things done for Germany or France or the UK or Australia. Those changes all start with an X. Makes them very easy to identify. Changes done by Sage or done by a Sage business partner for our customers start with a Y. And then anything that a customer may do for themselves, because we do encourage development and we will offer classes to teach you how to do all this stuff, that starts with a Z. That means you'll be able to quickly identify any of your changes. And I happen to know that the sales rep field is called rep num, and X3 is warning me because I didn't put an X or a Y or a Z in front of it. So I'm just going to click OK for the moment, and I'll show you why I did that. Anytime you reuse a field name within X3, it's going to prompt you with a list of tables where that field name has also been used. And say, do you mean this one? And if I pick one, it's going to bring across all of that same business logic. So things like the data type, which relates that to an object, which means I can use a hyperlink to drill down or use the select menu to get a list of valid sales rep fields or numbers. And then the rest I can just tab across the field, and it's going to fill in information for me. Now I can also just hit enter, and it'll fill in the whole row for me. So it's things like linking this field to a table, and then asking me, if this field gets deleted or is out of its master table, what do you want me to do with the record that may be in this table? Do you want me to stop the delete because that shouldn't be allowed to happen? Do I want to go ahead and clear out this field so that you don't have bad data left over? And then things like, is this a mandatory field? Should I reset it anytime you run the reset to 0 function? Can all be identified here. So that's why I broke the rule. Now I'm going to go back and fix it and change this field to start with a Z. So it's kind of a cheat, but works out. And then the other thing that you should do is assign an activity code. Activity codes are what's going to protect you throughout the upgrade process and the life of your Sage ERP X3 installation. Activity codes can be used to turn on or off functionality. They can be used to identify localizations or be used for sizing. In this case, we're going to use it for functionality purposes. And you're going to create an activity code so that anywhere in the system that you make a change, you're going to assign the activity code. This means when you go to upgrade Sage ERP X3, those changes, those personalizations and customizations won't be accidentally lost. We actually have protection in place to make sure that the system doesn't overwrite them. Now, if you follow our X, Y, and Z naming conventions, well, then you're probably going to be okay without any problems. So we're going to use the one I use all the time for Sage demo customizations, and just assign my activity code to this field. So now I could do a search within the system to say, show me everywhere that this activity code YX3 appears, and it would show me every field, screen, table where I've made any of my personalized changes. So I'm going to save my table, click the validate button, which is going to be what actually goes out to the database and updates my table setup. And now that I've modified my table, I can add my field to the screen. We're going to go back to my screen now and click on the Fields tab. And all I need to do is add my field to the table. Now I can right-click if I forgot my field name and hit select, and it'll show me a list, but I think I can remember zrep num. And I'm just going to press the Enter key. And since screens and tables have such a nice relationship with each other, it's going to remember all of that other information that I already entered on the table, so I don't have to enter it again. Things like the sales rep, the description for the field, the data type, my activity code is still here, which is a great thing. And whether or not it's mandatory, the tunnel means that I'm going to be able to right-click or click to drill down, look at the sales rep function itself, and then other information that goes along with it. So now I can save my screen and attempt to validate it. Validation is just a process where X3 is going to go out and compile and create the web view of the screen as well as the desktop view of the screen. And unfortunately, it's also going to check any errors, and it's letting me know that I don't have enough space in the up and down or the Y direction. And if I click the web visualization, it'll show me what that screen currently looks like. And you can see I didn't actually position my sales rep field very well. It happens to be falling in row number 12, and I actually want it in row number 2, but after the product field. So the product field, we have to check out what its position is first. Hopefully here, we'll give it a second to, I think it's Friday afternoon. Let me try that again. Okay, and my product field is in row number 2. So I'm just going to move my sales rep field here to 2, position number 5, save and validate my screen again. I can preview it one more time just to make sure it's in the right place, and now we're good. So I can exit out of my screen maintenance function and take a look at my new modified screen. So now I can look at my sales rep field. From here, I have the ability to right click and select to see a possible choice of sales reps that are valid. I can click on the hyperlink, which is the sales rep field, to take me to the sales rep function and show me a list of possible sales reps or maybe more details about those sales reps. And all of this has been done without writing a single bit of code. So here's more information about Mary, her address information, and now I can just save my product, and I can move from this record to another record. And you can see that I've still saved my rep that I've added to my product. Now again, this is very easy for users who may want to be given permissions to add a field. It's very easy to customize X3. I didn't have to write any code. I don't have to know what a commit statement means. X3's Toolkit and the SAFE platform handle all of that for me. Now for those of you who are a bit more technical and want to see some code, I'm going to show you that now. For those of you who aren't, just bear with us for a second. So Sage ERP-X3 gives you a couple processes where you can modify the business rules that are going to be associated with X3, or with this object. There's a standard process. This is the code that's delivered from Sage, and this handles the basic ERP functionality. We have what we call a vertical process, which is where legislative changes or maybe things built specific for North America or done as an integration with X3 by another party, those will be added in vertical processes. And then specific processes are reserved for customers. So if you want to change how your business logic works, you can safely make changes to the business rules from this specific process. And the way that this works, a specific process will be executed first, then a vertical process, and then a standard process. This gives you the capability to stop standard business processes from running, or maybe augment them. Have this run after the standard process to make an additional change. We also provide what we call entry points, where you can step into the middle of some complex calculations for things like pricing rules or allocation rules, where you might want to tweak some of the values or tweak the logic that goes on there. All of that can be done without touching the standard code. So that means when X3 gets upgraded, we're not going to send you a new SPAY ITM. We're just going to send you a new file called sub-ITM. All you'll need to do is make sure that whatever you were referencing in the sub-ITM from your SPAY still exists, and of course test anything during the upgrade process, but it's not going to be accidentally lost. It will still be where you left it. So let's take a look real quick at what a sub-ITM looks like. And Sage ERP-X3 comes with a standard editor that's kind of boring. It looks like this, just black and white code. We also integrate with Eclipse, For those of you who prefer a more helpful editor, it's probably the best way to put it, you can take a look at the SPAY ITM there as well. It's also available from the right-click menu. I can take a look at the action up here. This is basically your events that happen within the object, and I've just flagged that the event, whenever I go ahead and click the Save button or verify that I want to make a change, this is where I get to check the business rules. Have I modified everything correctly? Are all the required fields filled in? Maybe I want to do a little bit of extra checking. There was a mandatory checkbox on both the table and the screen that I could have used without writing code. But I want to check if this sales rep field has been left blank. I'm going to not force them to fill it in yet because we're just going to start filling this in as we go. And so I just want to remind people that they should fill it in, but I don't want to stop them from saving any other changes that they've made if they want to leave it blank. So I just want to give them a yes or no box. The yes or no box is going to say that you've left the sales rep field blank. Do you want to continue anyways? And all this is a simple if statement. If this is the reference to the screen, and then this is the reference to the field, has been left blank. Open up my yes or no box. If they say, yes, I meant to, let them continue. And if they say no, send them back to the field that they have left blank. So we're going to, oops, I forgot to click the compile button. Let me compile my code since I removed my comment at the top, and I'll show you how that works. So we can go back into my product screen. I'm going to pick another product that doesn't have a sales rep, and we'll just make a quick change here to my description. Click the Save button, and there's my yes or no question. So I left the sales rep blank. Do you want to continue? No. And it leaves me back so I can fill in my sales rep field. If I click Save again, I can say, yes, I meant to, and it goes ahead and completes the save for me. So I hope you can see how easy it is to write some code within Sage ERP X3 as well as what you can do without writing code. Process maps are available and a great way to walk you through the process as well. So we have those available. We also have process maps for basic administration for things like our imports, updating data within the system, or our workflows or our process diagrams. So I'd just like to thank everybody for your time today, and hopefully you'll come back and learn more about Sage ERP X3. We do have time for questions.